Chapter 10 of Skylark 3 by E. Doc Smith. This LibriVox recording is in the public domain. Norlaminian Science. Breakfast over, Seaton watched intently as his tray, laden with empty containers, floated away from him and disappeared into an opening in the wall. "How do you do it, Orlon?" he asked curiously. "I can hardly believe it, even after seeing it done." Each tray is carried upon the end of a beam or rod of force, and supported rigidly by it. Since the beam is tuned to the individual wave of the instrument you wear upon your chest, your tray is, of course, placed in front of you, at a predetermined distance, as soon as the sending force is actuated. When you have finished your meal, the beam is shortened. Thus, the tray is drawn back to the food laboratory, where other forces cleanse and sterilize the various utensils and place them in readiness for the next meal. It would be an easy matter to have this same mechanism place your meals before you wherever you might go upon this planet, provided only that a clear path can be plotted from the laboratory to your person. "Thanks, but it wouldn't pay. No telling where we'd be. Besides, we'd better eat in the Skylark most of the time, to keep our cook good-natured." "Well, I see Rovol's got his boat here for me, so guess I'd better turn up a few RPMs. Coming along, Dot, or have you got something else on your mind?" "I'm going to leave you for a while. I can't really understand even a radio, and just thinking about those funny, complicated rays and things you are going after makes me dizzy in the head. Mrs. Orlon is going to take us over to the country of youth. She says Margaret and I can play around with her daughter and her bunch and have a good time while you scientists are doing your stuff." "All right. Bye till tonight." And Seaton stepped out into the grounds where the first of rays was waiting. The flyer was a torpedo-shaped craft of some transparent, glassy material, completely enclosed except for one circular opening or doorway. From the midsection, which was about 5 feet in diameter and provided with heavily cushioned seats capable of carrying 4 passengers in comfort, the hull tapered down smoothly to a needle point at each end. As Seaton entered and settled himself into the cushions, Rovol touched a lever. Instantly, a transparent door slid across the opening, locking itself into position, flush with the surface of the hull, and the flyer darted into the air and away. For a few minutes there was silence as Seaton studied the terrain beneath them. Fields or cities there were none. The land was covered with dense forests and vast meadows, with here and there great buildings surrounded by gracious park-like areas. Rovol finally broke the silence. "I understand your problem, I believe, since Orlon has transferred to me all the thoughts he had from you. With the aid of the Rovolon you have brought us, I am confident that we shall be able to work out a satisfactory solution of the various problems involved. It will take us some few minutes to traverse the distance to my laboratory, and if there are any matters upon which your mind is not quite clear, I shall try to clarify them." "That's letting me down easy," Seaton grinned. "But you don't need to be afraid of hurting my feelings. I know just exactly how ignorant and dumb I am compared to you. There are a lot of things I don't get at first. First and nearest, this airboat. It has no power plant at all. I assume that it, like so many other things hereabouts, is riding on the end of a rod of force." "Exactly. The beam is generated and maintained in my laboratory. All that is here in the flyer is a small sender for remote control." "How do you obtain your power?" asked Seaton. "Solar generators and tide motors? I know that all your work is done by electricity, but Orlon did not inform us as to the sources." "We have not used such inefficient generators for many thousands of years. Long ago it was shown by research that these rays were constantly being generated in abundance in outer space, and that they could be collected upon spherical condensers and transmitted without loss to the surface of the planet by means of matched and synchronized crystals. Several millions of these condensers have been built and thrown out to become tiny satellites of Norlaminian. How did you get them far enough out? The first ones were forced out to the required distance by beams of force produced by the conversion of electricity, which was in turn produced from turbines, solar motors, and tide motors. With a few of them out, however, it was easy to obtain sufficient power to send out more, and now, whenever one of us requires more power than he has at his disposal, he merely sends out such additional collectors as he needs. Now about those fifth-order rays, which will penetrate a zone of force. I am told that they are not ether waves after all. They are not ether waves. The fourth-order rays, of which the theory has been completely worked out, are the shortest vibrations that can be propagated through the ether, for the ether itself is not a continuous medium. We do not know its nature exactly, but it is an actual substance and is composed of discrete particles of the fourth order. Now the zone of force, which is itself a fourth-order phenomenon, sets up a condition of stasis in the particles composing the ether. These particles are relatively so coarse that rays and particles of the fifth order will pass through the fixed zone without retardation. Therefore, if there is anything between the particles of the ether, this matter is being debated hotly amongst us at the present time, it must be sub-ether, if I may use that term. We have never been able to investigate any of these things experimentally, not even such a coarse aggregation as is the ether, but now, having Rovolon, it will not be many thousands of years until we shall have extended our knowledge many orders farther in both directions. Just how will Rovolon help you? It will enable us to generate a force of the 9th magnitude. That much power is necessary to set up what you have so aptly named a zone of force, and will give us a source of 4th, 5th, and probably higher orders of rays, which, if they are generated in space at all, are beyond our present reach. The zone of force is necessary to shield certain items of equipment from ether vibrations, as any such vibration inside the controlling fields of force renders observation or control of the higher orders of rays impossible. I see. I'm learning something, Seaton replied cordially. Just as the higher powered a radio set is, the more perfect must be its shielding. Yes, just a trace of any gas will destroy the usefulness of your most sensitive vacuum tubes, and just as imperfect shielding will allow interfering waves to enter sensitive electrical apparatus, in that same fashion will even the slightest ether vibration interfere with the operation of the extremely sensitive fields and lenses of force which must be used in controlling forces of the higher orders. You haven't tested the theory of the fourth order yet, have you? No, but that is unnecessary. The theory of the fourth order is not really theory at all. It is mathematical fact. Although we have never been able to generate them, we know exactly the forces you use in your ship of space, and we can tell you of some thousands of others more or less similar and also highly useful forces, which you have not yet discovered, but are allowing to go to waste. We know exactly what they are, how to liberate and control them, and how to use them. In fact, in the work which we are to begin today, we shall use but little ordinary power. Almost all our work will be done by fourth order forces, liberated from copper by means of the Rovolon you have given me. But here we are at my laboratory. You already know that the best way to learn is by doing, and we shall begin at once. The flyer alighted upon a lawn quite similar to the one before the observatory of Orlon, and the scientist led his earthly guest through the main entrance of the imposing structure of vari-colored marble and gleaming metal, and into the vast, glass-lined room that was his laboratory. Great benches lined the walls, and there were hundreds of dials, meters, tubes, transformers, and other instruments whose uses Seaton could not even guess. Rovol first donned a suit of transparent, flexible material of a deep golden color, instructing Seaton to do the same, explaining that much of the work would be with dangerous frequencies and with high pressures, and that the suits were not only absolute insulators against electricity, heat, and sound, but were also ray filters proof against any harmful radiation. As each helmet was equipped with radiophones, conversation was not interfered with in the least. Rovol took up a tiny flash pencil, and with it deftly cut off a bit of Rovolon, almost microscopic in size. This he placed upon a great block of burnished copper, and upon it plate of force. As he manipulated two levers, two more beams of force flattened out the particle of metal, spread it out over the copper, and forced it into the surface of the block until the thin coating was at every point in molecular contact with the copper beneath it. A perfect job of plating, and one done in the twinkling of an eye. He then cut out a piece of the treated copper the size of a pea, and other forces rapidly built around its structure of coils and metallic tubes. This apparatus he suspended in the air at the extremity of a small beam of force. The block of copper was next cut in two, and Rovol's fingers moved rapidly over the keys of a machine which resembled slightly an overgrown and exceedingly complicated bookkeeping machine. Streams and pencils of force flashed and crackled, and Seaton saw raw materials transformed into a complete power plant. In its center, the 200-pound lump of plated copper, where an instant before there had been only empty space upon the massive metal bench. Rovol's hands moved rapidly from keys to dials and back, and suddenly a zone of force as large as a basketball appeared around the apparatus poised in the air. "But it will fly off, and we can't stop it with anything," Seaton protested, and it did indeed dart rapidly upward. The old man shook his head as he manipulated still more controls, and Seaton gasped as 9 stupendous beams of force hurled themselves upon that brilliant spherical mirror of pure energy, seized it in mid-flight, and shaped it resistlessly under his bulging eyes into a complex geometrical figure of precisely the desired form. Lurid violet light filled the room, and Seaton turned towards the bar. That 200-pound mass of copper was shrinking visibly, second by second, so vast were the forces being drawn from it, and the searing, blinding light would have been intolerable but for the protective color filters of his helmet. Tremendous flashes of lightning ripped and tore from the relief points of the bench to the ground rods, which flared at blue-white temperatures under the incessant impacts. Knowing that this corona loss was but an infinitesimal fraction of the power being used, Seaton's very mind staggered as he strove to understand the magnitude of the forces at work upon that stubborn sphere of energy. The aged scientist used no tools whatever, as we understand the term. His laboratory was a powerhouse. At his command were the stupendous forces of a battery of planetoid accumulators, and added to these were the fourth order, ninth magnitude forces of the disintegrating copper bar. Electricity, proto-electricity, and fourth order rays under millions upon millions of kilovolts of pressure leaped to do the bidding of that wonderful brain, stored with the accumulated knowledge of countless thousands of years of scientific research. Watching the ancient physicist work, Seaton compared himself to a schoolboy mixing chemicals indiscriminately and ignorantly, with no knowledge whatever of their properties, occasionally obtaining a reaction by pure chance. Whereas he had worked with intra-atomic energy, schoolboy fashion, the master craftsman before him knew every reagent, every reaction, and worked with known and thoroughly familiar agencies to bring about his exact predetermined ends, just as calmly certain of the results as Seaton himself would have been in his own laboratory, mixing equivalent quantities of solution of barium chloride and of sulfuric acid to obtain a precipitate of barium sulfate. Hour after hour Rovol labored on, oblivious to the passage of time in his zeal of accomplishment, the while carefully instructing Seaton, who watched every step with intense interest and did everything possible for him to do. Bit by bit a towering structure arose in the middle of the laboratory. A metal foundation supported a massive compound bearing, which in turn carried a tubular network of latticed metal, mounted like an immense telescope. Near the upper outer end of this open work tube, a group of 9 forces held the field of force rigidly in place in its axis. At the lower extremity were mounted seats for 2 operators and the control panels necessary for the operation of the intricate system of forces and motors which would actuate and control that gigantic projector. Immense hour and declination circles could be read by optical systems from the operators' seats, circles fully 40 feet in diameter, graduated with incredible delicacy and accuracy into decimal fractions of seconds of arc, and each driven by variable speed motors through gear trains and connections having no backlash whatever. While Rovol was working upon one of the last instruments to be installed upon the controlling panel, a mellow note sounded throughout the building, and he immediately ceased his labors and opened the master switches of his power plants. "You've done well, youngster," he congratulated his helper as he began to take off his protective covering. "Without your aid, I could not have accomplished nearly this much during one period of labor. The periods of exercise and of relaxation are at hand, and let us return to the house of Orlon, where we shall gather to relax and to refresh ourselves for the labors of tomorrow." "But it's almost done," protested Seaton. "Let's finish it up and shoot a little juice through it, just to try it out." "There speaks the rashness and impatience of youth," rejoined the scientist, calmly removing the younger man's suit and leading him out to the waiting airboat. "I read in your mind that you're often guilty of laboring continuously until your brain loses its keen edge. Learn now, once and for all, that such conduct is worse than foolish, it is criminal. We have labored the full period. Laboring for more than that length of time without recuperation results in a loss of power, which, if persisted in, wreaks permanent injury to the mind, and by it you gain nothing. We have more than ample time to do that which must be done. The 5th order projector shall be completed before the warning torpedo shall have reached the planet of Fenachrone. Therefore, overexertion is unwarranted. As for testing, know now that only mechanisms built by bunglers require testing. Properly built machines work properly." "But I'd like to see it work just once anyway," lamented Seaton, as the small airship tore through the air on its way back to the observatory. "You must cultivate calmness, my son, and the art of relaxation. With those qualities, your race can easily double its present span of useful life. Physical exercise to maintain the bodily tissues at their best, and mental relaxation following mental toil, these things are the secrets of a long and productive life. Why attempt to do more than can be accomplished efficiently? There is always tomorrow. I am more interested in that which we are now building than you can possibly be, since many generations of the Rovol have anticipated its construction. Yet I realize that in the interest of our welfare and the progress of civilization, today's labors must not be prolonged beyond today's period of work. Furthermore, you yourself realize that there is no optimum point at which any task may be interrupted. Short of final completion of any project, one point is the same as any other. Had we continued, we would have wished to continue still farther, and so on without end. "You're probably right at that," the impetuous chemist conceded, as their craft came to earth before the observatory. Crane and Orlon were already in the common room, as were the scientists Seaton already knew, as well as a group of women and children still strangers to the terrestrials. In a few minutes Orlon's companion, a dignified white-haired woman, entered, accompanied by Dorothy, Margaret, and a laughing, boisterous group of men and women from the country of youth. Introductions over, Seaton turned to Crane. "How's every little thing, Mart?" "Very well indeed. We are building an observatory in space, or rather, Orlon is building it, and I am doing what little I can to help him. In a few days we shall be able to locate the system of the Fenachrone. How is your work progressing?" "Smoother than a kitten's ear. Got the fourth order projector about done. We're going to project a fourth order force out to grab us some dense material, a pretty close approach to pure neutronium. There's nothing dense enough around here, even in the core of the central sun, so we're going out to a white dwarf star, one a good deal like the companion star to Sirius in Canis Major. Get some material of the proper density from its core and convert our sender into a fifth order machine. Then we can really get busy, go places, and do things." "Neutronium? Pure mass?" queried Crane. "I have been under the impression that it does not exist. Of what use can such a substance be to you?" "Can't get pure neutronium, of course. Couldn't use it if we could. What we need and are going to get is a material of about 2.5 million specific gravity. Got to have it for lenses and controls for the fifth order forces. Those rays go right through anything less dense without measurable refraction. But I see Rovol's giving me a nasty look. He's my boss on this job, and I imagine this kind of talk's barred during the period of relaxation as being work. That so, Chief?" "You know that it is barred, you incorrigible young cub," answered Rovol with a smile. "All right, boss. One more little infraction and I'll shut up like a clam. I'd like to know what the girls have been doing." "We've been having a wonderful time," Dorothy declared. "We've been designing fabrics and ornaments and jewels and things. Wait till you see 'em." "Fine. All right. Orlon, it's your party. What to do?" "This is the time of exercise. We have many forms, most of which are unfamiliar to you. You all swim, however, and as that is one of the best exercises, I suggest we all swim." "Lead us to it," Seaton exclaimed. Then his voice changed abruptly. "Wait a minute. I don't know about our swimming in copper sulfate solution." "We swim in fresh water as often as in salt, and the pool is now filled with distilled water." The terrestrials quickly donned their bathing suits, and all went through the observatory and down a winding path, bordered with that peculiarly beautiful scarlet and green shrubbery, to the pool, an artificial lake covering 100 acres, its polished metal bottom and sides strikingly decorated with jewels and glittering tiles, in tasteful yet contrasting inlaid designs. Any desired depth of water was available and plainly marked. From the fenced-off shallows where the smallest children splashed to the 40 feet of liquid crystal which received the diver who cared to try his skill from one of the many springboards, flying rings, and catapults which rose high into the air a short distance away from the entrance. Orlon and the others of the older generation plunged into the water without ado, and struck out for the other shore, using a fast double overarm stroke. Swimming in a wide circle, they came out upon the apparatus and went through a series of methodical dives and gymnastic performances. It was evident that they swam, as Orlon had intimated, for exercise. To them, exercise was a necessary form of labor, labor which they performed thoroughly and well, but nothing to call forth the whole-souled enthusiasm they displayed in their chosen fields of mental effort. The visitors from the country of youth, however, locked arms and sprang to surround the four terrestrials, crying, "Let's do a group dive." "I don't believe I can swim well enough to enjoy what's coming," whispered Margaret to Crane, and they slipped into the pool and turned around to watch. Seaton and Dorothy, both strong swimmers, locked arms and laughed as they were encircled by the green phalanx and swept out to the end of a dock-like structure and upon a catapult. "Hold tight, everybody," someone yelled, and interlaced, straining arms and legs held the green and white bodies in one motionless group as a gigantic force hurled them 50 feet into the air and out over the deepest part of the pool. There was a mighty splash and a miniature tidal wave as that mass of humanity struck the water. Many feet they went down before the cordon was broken and the individual units came to the surface. Then pandemonium reigned. Vigorous informal games, having to do with floating and sinking balls and effigies, pushball, in which the players never seemed to know or to care upon which side they were playing, water fights and dunking contests. A green mermaid, having felt the incredible power of Seaton's arms as he tossed her lightly away from a goal he was temporarily defending, put both her small hands around his biceps wonderingly, amazed at a strength unknown and impossible upon her world, then playfully tried to push him under. Failing, she called for help. "He's needed a good ducking for ages," Dorothy cried, and she and several other girls threw themselves upon him. Over and around him the lithe forms flashed, while the rest of the young people splashed water impartially over all the combatants and cheered them on. In the midst of the battle the signal sounded to end the period of exercise. "Saved by the bell," Seaton laughed. Thoroughly ducked and almost half drowned, he was allowed to swim ashore. When all had returned to the common room of the observatory and had seated themselves, Orlon took out his miniature ray projector, no larger than a fountain pen, and flashed it briefly upon one of the hundreds of button-like lenses upon the wall. Instantly each chair converted itself into a form-fitting divan, inviting complete repose. "I believe that you of Earth would perhaps enjoy some of our music during this, the period of relaxation and repose. It is so different from your own," Orlon remarked, as he again manipulated his tiny force tube. Every light was extinguished, and there was felt a profoundly deep vibration, a note so low as to be palpable rather than audible, and simultaneously the utter darkness was relieved by a tinge of red so dark as to be barely perceptible, while a peculiar somber fragrance pervaded the atmosphere. The music rapidly ran the gamut to the limit of audibility, and in the same tempo the lights traversed the visible spectrum and disappeared. Then came a crashing chord and a vivid flare of blended light, ushering in an indescribable symphony of sound and color, accompanied by a slower succession of shifting, blending odors. The quality of tone was now that of a gigantic orchestra, now that of a full brass band, now that of a single unknown instrument, as though the composer had had at his command every overtone capable of being produced by any possible instrument, and with them had woven a veritable tapestry of melody upon an incredibly complex loom of sound. As went the harmony, so the play of light accompanied it. Neither music nor illumination came from any apparent source. They simply pervaded the entire room. When the music was fast, and certain passages were of a rapidity impossible for any human fingers to attain, the lights flashed in vivid tiny pencils, intersecting each other in sharply drawn, brilliant figures, which changed with dizzying speed. When the tempo was slow, the beams were soft and broad, blending into each other to form sinuous, indefinite, writhing patterns, whose very vagueness was infinitely soothing. "What do you think of it, Mrs. Seaton?" Orlon asked. "Marvelous," breathed Dorothy, awed. "I never imagined anything like it. I can't begin to tell you how much I like it. I never dreamed of such absolute perfection of execution, and the way the lighting accompanies the theme is just too perfectly wonderful for words. It was incredibly brilliant." "Brilliant, yes. Perfectly executed, yes. But I notice that you say nothing of depth of feeling or of emotional appeal." Dorothy blushed uncomfortably and started to say something, but Orlon silenced her and continued: "You need not apologize. I had a reason for speaking as I did, for in you I recognize a real musician, and our music is indeed entirely soulless. That is the result of our ancient civilization. We are so old that our music is purely intellectual, entirely mechanical instead of emotional. It is perfect, but, like most of our other arts, it is almost completely without feeling." "But your statues are wonderful." "As I told you, those statues were made myriads of years ago. At that time we also had real music, but unlike statuary, music at that time could not be preserved for posterity. That is another thing you have given us. Attend." At one end of the room, as upon a three-dimensional screen, the four terrestrials saw themselves seated in the control room of the Skylark. They saw and heard Margaret take up her guitar and strike four sonorous chords in A. Then, as if they had been there in person, they heard themselves sing "The Bullfrog" and all the other songs they had sung, far off in space. They heard Margaret suggest that Dorothy play some real music, and heard Seaton's comment upon the quartet. "In that, youngster, you were entirely wrong," said Orlon, stopping the reproduction for a moment. "The entire planet was listening to you very attentively, and we were enjoying it as no music has been enjoyed for thousands of years." "The whole planet?" gasped Margaret. "Were you broadcasting it? How could you?" "Easy," grinned Seaton. "They can do almost anything with these rays of theirs." "When you have time, in some period of labor, we would appreciate it very much if you four would sing for us again, would give us more of your vast store of youthful music, for we can now preserve it exactly as it is sung. But much as we enjoy the quartet, Miss Seaton, it was your work upon the violin that took us by storm. Beginning with tomorrow, my companion intends to have you spend as many periods as you will, playing for our records. We shall now have your music." "If you like it so well, would you rather I'd play you something I hadn't played before?" "That is labor. We could not—" "Faugh!" Dorothy interrupted. "Don't you see that I could really play right now with somebody to listen, who really enjoys music, whereas if I tried to play in front of a record I'd be perfectly mechanical?" "Atta girl, Dot. I'll get your fiddle." "Keep your seat, son," instructed Orlon, as the case containing the Stradivarius appeared before Dorothy, borne by a pencil of force. "While that temperament is incomprehensible to every one of us, it is undoubtedly true that the artistic mind does work in that manner. We listen." Dorothy swept into the melody in F, and as the poignantly beautiful strains poured forth From that wonderful violin she knew that she had her audience with her. Though so intellectual that they themselves were incapable of producing music of real depth of feeling, they could understand and could enjoy such music with an appreciation impossible to a people of lesser mental attainments, and their profound enjoyment of her playing, burned into her mind by the telepathic, almost hypnotic power of the Norlaminian mentality, raised her to heights of power she had never before attained. Playing as one inspired, she went through one tremendous solo after another, holding her listeners spellbound, urged on by their intense feeling to carry them further and ever further into the realm of pure emotional harmony. The bell which ordinarily signaled the end of the period of relaxation did not sound. For the first time in thousands of years the planet of Norlamin deserted its rigid schedule of life to listen to one Earthwoman pouring out her very soul upon her incomparable violin. The final note of memories died away in a diminuendo wail, and the musician almost collapsed into Seaton's arms. The profound silence, more impressive far than any possible applause, was soon broken by Dorothy. "There, I'm all right now, Dick. I was about out of control for a minute. I wish they could have had that on a recorder. I'll never be able to play like that again if I live to be 1,000 years old." "It is on record, daughter. Every note and every inflection is preserved precisely as you played it," Orlon assured her. "That is our only excuse for allowing you to continue as you did, almost to the point of exhaustion. While we cannot really understand an artistic mind of the peculiar type to which yours belongs, we realize that each time you play you are doing something that no one, not even yourself, can ever do again in precisely the same subtle fashion. Therefore we allowed, in fact encouraged you to go on as long as that creative impulse should endure, not merely for our pleasure in hearing it, great though that pleasure was, but in the hope that our workers in music could, by careful analysis of your product, determine quantitatively the exact vibrations or overtones which make the difference between emotional and intellectual music." End of chapter 10.